All right, so now that you've done some practice just solving the simple equations, then the next objective that you're going to see in section 7.3 is just applying these, right? Looking at some problems where formulas are given, and instead of just plugging in and evaluating the formula like we did in the previous sections, we're going to be trying to find an unknown value. All right, so we've got a couple of these in our notes. And this should kind of give you an idea of what you're going to be doing as you work through the second objective in section 7.3. All right, so I'm given a formula in this first example, this first application problem in your notes for section 7.3. And the formula here is used to determine the amount of chlorine in pounds to add to a basin. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I understand what every variable represents to make sure I plug things in the right spot. We saw this in 7.1 as well. So A is the amount of chlorine in pounds. F is the flow through the basin in millions of gallons per day. And then C is the desired concentration of chlorine in parts per million. All right, so let's write down our formula here. And let's look at what values we know and can go ahead and plug in to that formula. All right, so the first piece of information I have here is that we have 18 pounds of chlorine to be added to the basin, right? So if I look at my variables, A, F, and C, that is the amount of chlorine to be added. So that is the value of A. That means I'm going to come down here and I'm going to plug in 1800 for the value of A in my formula. All right, now 8.34, that's part of the formula, so it's going to stay. And then I'm going to look at the second thing that I'm given, and that is a flow rate of 7.5 millions of gallons per day. All right, now look back up here at my variables. The flow rate is a value of F, so I'm going to plug this into my formula for a value of F. Now notice when things are written side by side, there's an implied multiplication. All right, so I'm going to plug in 7.5 for F. And then the unknown, the thing that I'm looking for, right? Notice the question here. What would be the resulting concentration? That means I need to solve for the value of C. All right, so to get C by itself, the first thing I'm going to do is simplify, right? Simplify anything that I can. And so I've got 8.34. Multiply that by 7.5, right? I'm going to go ahead and simplify this coefficient, right? That'll just make this easier to work with. So this is going to become 1800 is equal to 62.55 times C, right? Just going ahead and simplifying that. So now I can see all that's happening to C is it's being multiplied by 62.55. So remember, to solve an equation, you do the opposite. If this is being multiplied by 62.55, then I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide by that, right? That'll get C by itself. But if I do that to one side, I have to do the exact same thing to the other side. So now when I simplify, 1800 divided by 62.55 is going to leave me with 28.78. I'm rounding this to 2 decimal places. And then notice on the other side, right, the 62.55s, those are going to go away, which is what should happen here. And I have now solved for the value of C. And notice the units on C are in parts per million. All right, so to record this with its units, we'd be talking about 28.78 parts per million as the concentration of chlorine in parts per million. All right, so these application problems, it's a lot like what you did in 7.1. You're just plugging in values to a formula, but instead of just evaluating that formula, you're going to then use it to solve for some unknown variable. All right, so let's do one more together, all right, and then you'll be able to look through these in your study plan in that second objective. And I'm going to work this one the same way. I'm going to start with my formula, all right? This formula gives the amount of lumber in board feet, all right? So that's our BF here. And it is expressed by a formula of TWL, that's the thickness, the width, and the length of the board, divided by 12, all right? So again, I make sure I understand what my variables represent, all right? BF is the board feet, T is the thickness, W is the width, L is the length, and then the values that I'm given here, right? What is the total length? Notice that first question, right? The first thing I see there, what is the total length? That's what I'm looking for, all right? So that means right off the bat, I'm going to be trying to find L. And then what I'm given, all right, the values that I'm given, I've got a thickness, 1 inch. I've got a width, 6 inches, and I've got a value of board feet at 16. So just make sure you plug them in the right spots, right? Board feet is 16, right? Thickness is 1 inch. Remember, this is implied multiplication when they're side by side. Width is 6 inches. What I'm looking for is the length, so that variable has to stay. And all of this is divided by 12. All right, so if we simplify, we've got 16 is equal to, all right, 1 times 6 is, of course, just 6. And I'm not going to worry about the units when I'm solving the equation. So I'm going to write this as 6L divided by 12. All right, and then I could go ahead and simplify this one more step, kind of like when you're simplifying a fraction. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 12 divided by 6 is 2, right? That's the same thing. 6/12 is the same thing as 1/2. So I can write this equation as 16 is equal to just L over 2, right? Because you don't need a 1 in front of it. And then I can very easily see what's happening to L is it's being divided by 2. So to get L by itself, I would multiply by 2, but if I do that to one side, right, I got to do it to the other. And that would leave me with 32 on the left-hand side, right? These 2's would go away, which this is what should happen. And that's going to leave me with L. And notice the length is in feet, right? So when I find the value of L, I'm going to write the length as 32 feet. And then I have solved for the unknown value. All right. So again, 7.2 is going to be all about just simplifying, combining like terms and getting rid of parentheses. You need to make sure you get those down first because you need those to be able to solve equations correctly. In 7.3, first thing is just understanding how do you solve a simple equation. Figure out what's happening to the variable, do the opposite. And whatever happens to one side has to happen to the other side. And then for your application problems, plug in everything you know, see where it goes in the formula. And then when you figure out what the unknown value is, what you're trying to find, then the same process. Figure out what's happening to that variable, do the opposite, do the same thing to the other side, and solve for the unknown value. All right, so this should allow you to work through the study plan for 7.2 and 7.3. All right, the quizzes for 7.2 and 7.3 are due next Wednesday before we meet for class. Since we were not able to meet for class in person tonight, please feel free to reach out to me this next week with any questions that you have. You can send me an email, you can hop on Zoom during office hours, but let me know if there's anything in particular that you are having trouble with as you try to work through the section 7.2 and 7.3.